Admiral Kethvar stood at the observation deck of the Imperial monitoring station, his 6 eyes scanning the holographic displays that floated before him. The Valdran Empire had ruled this sector of space for 10,000 years. Their technology was supreme. Their military was unmatched. Their authority was absolute. Nothing in the known galaxy could challenge them. The morning shift had been routine. Trading vessels passed through the checkpoint. Mining ships returned with resources from the outer asteroids. Everything moved with the precise order that defined Valdran civilization. Kethvar felt the comfortable weight of superiority that came with serving the greatest empire in galactic history. Then the alarms began to scream. "Admiral!" The sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. Long-range detection has multiple contacts. Thousands of them. Kethvar moved to the station with quick steps. "Identify them. What fleet is approaching?" The operator's hands trembled as he adjusted the controls. "The signatures. They're marked as human, sir." A cold silence fell over the command center. Human. The word hung in the air like poison. Humans were slaves. Humans were primitives. Humans were a broken species that the Empire had conquered 30 years ago. Their world had been stripped of resources. Their people had been scattered across labor camps on a dozen planets. They had nothing. They were nothing. "Impossible," Kethvar said. "Humans don't have ships. They have work assignments. Sir, the computer confirms it. Human identification codes. Human language markers. And, sir..." The operator looked up with wide eyes. "The fleet size is estimated at 43,000 vessels." 43,000. The number made no sense. The entire Imperial Home Defense Fleet numbered 1,500 ships. How could slaves build 43,000 warships? Where would they get the resources? The technology? The training? Kethvar immediately opened a communication channel to the Imperial Palace. "This is Admiral Kethvar at Monitoring Station 7. We have a situation that requires immediate attention from the War Council. Within minutes..." His holographic display showed the faces of Emperor Daltheon and his military advisors. The Emperor's scaled face showed irritation at being disturbed. "What situation requires my attention, Admiral?" Daltheon asked. "Your Majesty, our sensors detect a massive fleet approaching the core system. The ships carry human identification markers." The Emperor laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Your sensors are malfunctioning. Humans are slaves. They work in our mines and factories. They do not fly warships." General Morak, the head of Imperial military forces, leaned forward. "Perhaps it is a refugee fleet. Maybe some humans escaped their work assignments and stole transport ships. They're probably coming to beg for mercy." But one voice disagreed. Grand Admiral Vexnil was the oldest member of the War Council. He had been there 30 years ago when Earth fell. His voice was quiet but firm. "Your Majesty, I remember humans differently. They fought us for 6 months with primitive weapons. They died by the billions but never surrendered. We had to exterminate most of their population to stop their resistance. The ones we kept alive. We chose the smartest ones. The engineers. The scientists. The military minds, and we put them to work," the Emperor said. "They've been useful. They repair our ships. They maintain our factories. They're tools, Vexnil. Tools don't rise up." Vexnil's expression remained troubled. "Your Majesty, I recommend we mobilize the full defense fleet immediately." "Nonsense," Morak said. "If it is humans, they're flying stolen transports. We'll destroy them within an hour." Kethvar watched his screens as the human fleet drew closer. Something was wrong. The ships weren't moving like civilian transports. They moved in perfect military formation. Their speed was incredible, faster than Imperial vessels should be able to travel without tearing apart from the stress. And they weren't slowing down. "They're entering the outer system," the sensor operator reported. Still no communication attempts. Still no course changes. Kethvar tried to hail the approaching fleet. "Unidentified vessels, this is Imperial Monitoring Station 7. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." No response, he tried again. "Human vessels, respond immediately or you will be fired upon." Still nothing. Then, as the fleet crossed into weapons range, every screen in the command center flickered. Every communication channel activated at once, and a voice spoke. It was human. Female, cold as the void of space. "Valdran Empire, 30 years ago you came to our world. You burned our cities. You killed our children. You took 4 billion lives. You enslaved those who survived. You thought you broke us. You thought you made us into tools. You were wrong. The holographic display showed the human fleet spreading out. Kethvar had spent 40 years in the military. He recognized the formation immediately. It was the tripartite encirclement, an advanced imperial tactic that required perfect coordination between thousands of ships. How did humans know it? The voice continued. You took our world. You took our children. You took our future. You taught us your technology while we worked in your factories. You taught us your tactics while we repaired your warships. You taught us your weaknesses while you treated us like animals. We learned everything. We waited, we planned. And now we've come home. The transmission ended with words that made Kethvar's blood run cold. Now we take everything. The human fleet accelerated. 43,000 ships moving as one. No hesitation, no fear, no mercy. Emperor Daltheon's face appeared again on the display. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something Kethvar had never seen before in a Valdran ruler. Fear. Deploy the defense fleet, the Emperor commanded. Every ship, every weapon, stop them. Across the Imperial homeworld, alarms began to sound. The pride of the Valdran military launched from their orbital docks. 1,500 warships, each one a masterpiece of destructive power. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets, carriers that held thousands of fighter craft, cruisers armed with weapons that could vaporize entire cities. They formed their battle lines between the human fleet and the Imperial core worlds. Admiral Gentok commanded the defense force. His voice boomed across all channels. Human slaves, you have made a fatal mistake. Turn back now and your deaths will be quick. Continue and we will make you suffer as your species suffered 30 years ago. The human fleet did not slow, did not turn, did not respond. Kethvar watched from his monitoring station as the two forces drew closer. The Imperial fleet was legendary, undefeated in 1,000 campaigns. Surely they would sweep aside this rebellion. Surely the humans had miscalculated, but Vexnil's words echoed in his mind. The ones we kept alive, we chose the smartest ones. The engineers, the scientists, the military minds. For 30 years, humans had been inside every Imperial facility. They had touched every weapon. They had maintained every ship. They had studied every system. What had the Empire taught them in those 3 decades of slavery? Kethvar was about to find out. The human fleet entered firing range and the battle for the Valdran Empire began. Dr. Sarah Chen remembered the day the sky burned. 30 years had passed, but the memory remained sharp as broken glass. She had been at the university that morning, teaching physics to graduate students. Her daughter Elena had been at school across the city. Sarah's husband was deployed with the military, trying to coordinate Earth's desperate defense against the alien invaders who had appeared in orbit 3 days earlier. The Valdran ships hung above Earth like metal moons. Humanity had tried to communicate, tried to negotiate, tried to understand what these aliens wanted. The answer came in fire. The bombardment began at noon. Energy weapons that humanity had never imagined tore through the atmosphere. Cities vanished in flashes of light. Nuclear weapons, Earth's most powerful arms, were launched in desperation. They struck the alien shields and dissipated like raindrops hitting stone. Sarah had run from the university as buildings collapsed around her. She had tried to reach Elena's school. She never made it. The blast wave from a nearby strike had thrown her into a crater. When she woke up, the world was ash and screaming. The war lasted 6 months. 6 months of humanity throwing everything they had at an enemy they couldn't hurt. 6 months of watching billions die. 6 months of learning that Earth was not alone in the universe and that the universe was cruel. When the Valdrans finally landed their ground forces, humanity had nothing left to fight with. The survivors were rounded up like animals. Sarah was pulled from the ruins of her city, her clothes burned, her body broken. She had searched for Elena in every refugee camp, every holding cell, every line of prisoners. Her daughter was never found. 8 years old, gone like smoke. The Valdrans sorted the survivors with cold efficiency. Children and young adults were sent to labor camps. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel were separated into another group. The elderly and injured were dealt with. Sarah never learned exactly what happened to them, but she could guess. She was transported to an Imperial research facility on a planet called Caxnor. The facility manufactured weapons for the Valdran military. Sarah and 200 other human scientists were put to work, maintaining the production systems, repairing equipment, and solving technical problems. The Valdrins treated them like useful machines. They were given just enough food to work, just enough rest to function, just enough medical care to stay alive. They wore collars that would kill them if they tried to escape. They lived in barracks with armed guards watching every movement. But the Valdrins made a critical mistake. They assumed that broken spirits meant broken minds. They assumed that grief meant stupidity. They assumed that slaves would remain slaves. General Marcus Webb was brought to the same facility 6 months after Sarah. He had been captured leading a resistance group in the ruins of New York. The Valdrins kept him alive because he understood military, logistics, and ship systems. They put him to work managing human labor teams in the shipyard sections. Sarah met Marcus during a work rotation. They were assigned to repair a damaged dreadnought's power systems. As they worked, Marcus whispered to her, "They're teaching us everything." Sarah had looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Look around. We're inside their ships. We see their weapons. We learn their technology. We understand their tactics. They think we're too broken to be dangerous. But we're learning, all of us." That night, Marcus gathered a small group of humans in the barracks. They spoke in whispers, aware that guards could be listening. "We can't beat them now," Marcus said. "We don't have the resources or the knowledge. But our children will, or our children's children. We make them think we're defeated. We work hard. We learn everything, and we teach the next generation. This isn't over. It's just beginning." The plan was insane. It would take decades. It would require humans in every Imperial facility to work together without direct communication. It would demand that they sacrifice their own lives for a future they would never see. Every human in that room agreed. Over the next 30 years, the plan spread through the labor camps and research facilities across the Empire. Human children born in captivity were raised with a secret purpose. They were taught to work hard, to appear obedient, to never show rebellion. But in hidden moments, they were taught something else. They were taught that they were soldiers. That Earth would rise again. That humanity would have its revenge. The Valdrins never noticed. To them, humans were just another conquered species, useful but harmless. The Empire had crushed 100 civilizations before. What made humans different? Sarah Chen worked in weapons research for 3 decades. She learned how Valdrin energy shields functioned. She understood their power systems. She memorized every design flaw, and she quietly shared that information with other humans through coded messages hidden in work reports and repair logs. Marcus Webb rose through the labor hierarchy, managing larger teams in shipyards across multiple planets. He studied Imperial fleet tactics. He learned how their command structure operated. He identified weaknesses in their defensive strategies, and he trained young humans in military thinking disguised as work efficiency lessons. Across the Empire, humans did the same. A physicist working on FTL drives discovered how to make them faster. An engineer maintaining communication systems learned how to infiltrate them. A programmer fixing AI routines found ways to corrupt them. Each piece of knowledge was a weapon. Each human was a spy. The Valdrins thought they were building weapons. Really, they were training an army. Now, 30 years later, Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of a human warship. The Reclamation was one of 43,000 vessels built in secret over 3 decades. Built in hidden shipyards and asteroid fields. Built using resources quietly diverted from Imperial mining operations. Built by humans who lived and died knowing they would never see Earth again. Marcus Webb commanded a battle group of 5,000 ships. He was 72 years old now, his hair white, his face lined with the weight of 3 decades of waiting, but his eyes were sharp as he watched the Imperial Defense Fleet form up ahead. "All ships, this is General Webb. You know what we're here to do. For Earth, for our families, for every human who died so we could reach this moment. Make them pay for every single life." Sarah opened the communication channel that would broadcast to the entire Valdrin Empire. She had practiced these words for 30 years. She thought of Elena every time. "Valdrin Empire, 30 years ago you came to our world." As she spoke, she watched the tactical display. The Valdrins were deploying in standard defensive formation. She recognized it immediately. She had helped repair ships that used this formation dozens of times. She knew exactly where the weaknesses were. The human fleet split into 3 groups. The tripartite encirclement, an Imperial tactic that the Valdrins had used for centuries. But humans had improved it. They had found the flaws. They had made it perfect. The Imperial fleet opened communication channels broadcasting threats and demands for surrender. Marcus muted them. There would be no negotiation, no mercy, no surrender. The Valdrans had taught humanity many things during 30 years of slavery. They had taught them technology. They had taught them tactics. They had taught them patience. But most importantly, they had taught them hate. Sarah looked at the image of the Imperial homeworld on her display. Somewhere down there in the vast archives were records of every human taken from Earth, every life broken, every child lost, every dream destroyed. Weapons range in 90 seconds, the tactical officer reported. Sarah Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Fire when ready. Admiral Gentok watched the human fleet approach with supreme confidence. 1,500 Imperial warships against 43,000 slave vessels. The numbers might favor the humans, but numbers meant nothing without quality. Imperial weapons had conquered 100 worlds. What could slaves possibly do? All ships weapons free, he commanded. Show these humans what happens to those who challenge the Empire. The Imperial fleet opened fire. Energy beams that could vaporize mountains lanced through space. Missiles that carried planet-cracker warheads streaked toward the human formation. Enough firepower to destroy continents focused on the approaching enemy. The weapons struck human shields and dissipated. Gentok stared at his display in disbelief. What, how? His tactical officer's voice was confused. Sir, their shields are absorbing our energy weapons completely. No damage registered. That's impossible. Our weapons can cut through any known shielding technology. They know our weapons, Admiral. They've been repairing them for 30 years. The reality of that statement hit Gentok like a physical blow. Every weapon, every ship, every system. Humans had maintained all of them. They had studied every detail. They knew exactly how Imperial technology worked because they had spent 3 decades touching it, fixing it, and learning from it. The human fleet continued their advance, completely unharmed. Then they returned fire. The first weapon was something Gentok had never seen. Torpedoes that seemed to phase in and out of normal space. They passed through the Imperial shields as if the shields didn't exist and struck the dreadnought supremacy directly. The ship's power core exploded. 10,000 crew members died in an instant. Evasive action, Gentok screamed, but the second wave was already launching. These weapons moved at impossible speeds, missiles accelerating to relativistic velocity, close to the speed of light. They arrived before sensors could even detect them launching. 3 more Imperial ships exploded, then 5 more, then a dozen. The third wave was the worst. It wasn't physical weapons at all. It was code. Viral AI that infiltrated ship systems through their own communication networks. Imperial vessels began reporting system failures. Weapons offline, navigation corrupted, life support flickering. The humans had turned the Empire's own technology against them. Cut all external communications, Gentok ordered. Isolate our systems. But it was too late. The virus was already spreading through the fleet like disease through a body. Ships went dark. Others fired on their own allies. Their targeting systems hijacked. Chaos erupted across the Imperial formation. On the monitoring station, Admiral Kethvar watched in horror. In 30 minutes of combat, the legendary Imperial Defense Fleet was being torn apart. Dreadnoughts that had served for 1,000 years were burning hulks. Carriers that held thousands of fighters drifted dead in space. The human fleet hadn't lost a single ship. On the Imperial homeworld, citizens gathered in public squares to watch the battle displayed on massive screens. The government had promised swift victory. They had called it a minor rebellion. They had said the human slaves would be crushed within hours. Instead, they watched their invincible military die. Panic spread through the cities. People ran for shelters. The government buildings were stormed by mobs demanding answers. How could this happen? How could slaves defeat the Empire? In the Imperial Palace, Emperor Daltheon raged at his war council. Destroy them! Use everything we have! General Morok's face was pale. Your Majesty, the defense fleet is... It's gone. 70% casualties in the first hour. The remaining ships are retreating. Then deploy the planetary defenses. Activate every weapon system on the homeworld. We're trying, Your Majesty, but the systems are not responding. Something is blocking our commands. In a computer center deep beneath the palace, 3 human technicians worked at their stations. They had maintained these systems for 15 years. They knew every access point. Every security measure, every override code. With a few keystrokes, they had locked out the entire planetary defense grid. The guards noticed too late. By the time they reached the technicians, the humans had already activated the lockout. One guard raised his weapon. The oldest technician, a woman named Maria Santos, looked at the guard with calm eyes. "Do it, we've already won," the guard fired. 3 humans died, but the defense grid remained locked. In orbit, human ships descended toward the planet. Not warships, troop transports. They dropped pods through the atmosphere, bypassing the frozen defense systems with ease. The pods landed in cities across the Imperial homeworld. When they opened, armed humans emerged. But these weren't soldiers. These were slaves. Workers from the labor camps. Scientists from the research facilities. Engineers from the shipyards. They knew the planet's layout better than the Valdrins themselves. They had cleaned these streets. They had repaired these buildings. They had maintained every system in every city. Dr. Sarah Chen's pod landed directly outside the Imperial Palace. She stepped out wearing armor that bore the symbols of Earth, a blue and green sphere on a black field. Around her, 200 former slaves formed up. They had trained for this day in secret for decades. Palace guards opened fire. Human shields held. Human weapons returned fire with precision. The guards fell. Sarah led her team through corridors she had walked 1,000 times as a slave. She had scrubbed these floors. She knew every room, every passage, every security checkpoint. The palace's own blueprints were in her head, memorized during years of maintenance work. General Marcus Webb's forces secured the military command centers without firing a shot. Why would they need to fight? Humans had built the security systems. They knew all the access codes. They simply walked in and took control while confused Valdrin officers watched in disbelief. The weapons facilities, the power plants, the communication hubs, all fell within hours. Humans had maintained them all. Humans knew every weakness. The Empire's own infrastructure betrayed them because humans had been the ones keeping it running. Emperor Daltheon retreated to his throne room, surrounded by his elite guard. He watched the screens showing his empire collapsing. Impossible. This was impossible. The throne room doors exploded inward. Sarah Chen walked through the smoke, flanked by her team. The elite guards raised their weapons, but Sarah's soldiers were faster. Precision shots dropped each guard before they could fire. Daltheon stood from his throne, his scales flushed with rage and fear. "You were nothing. You were slaves. You cleaned our floors and fixed our machines. You were beneath us." Sarah walked closer, her face showing no emotion. "Yes, we cleaned your floors. We fixed your machines. We touched every piece of technology in your empire, and you never thought to ask what we might be learning. You were broken. We crushed your world. We killed billions of you." "You killed 4 billion of us," Sarah agreed. Her voice was quiet, cold. "You took my daughter. She was 8 years old. Her name was Elena. You taught me how to build weapons while I mourned her. You taught us your technology while we buried our dead. You thought our grief made us weak." She stopped directly in front of the Emperor. "You were wrong." Daltheon's hand moved toward a control on his throne. Sarah recognized it immediately. She had repaired this throne 5 years ago. She knew what that button did. "The planet killer," she said. "A weapon that destroys entire star systems. You're thinking about activating it, destroying your own homeworld rather than surrendering." The Emperor's eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" "That's a classified weapon." Sarah smiled. "I fixed the power coupling 3 times. The system has a 47-second activation sequence, and the control can be overridden from the main computer core in the basement, which my people took control of 2 hours ago." She gestured to one of her soldiers who held up a datapad, showing the planet killer system locked out and disabled. "You taught us everything," Sarah repeated. "Every weapon, every system, every secret. For 30 years. You had us inside your most secure facilities and you thought we were just tools. You never imagined that tools might have minds, that slaves might have plans, that victims might have long memories." Daltheon slumped back onto his throne, defeated. Around him, his palace was filled with humans. His fleet was destroyed. His weapons were disabled. His empire was gone. "What happens now?" he asked. Sarah looked at the Emperor who had ordered the death of her world. The being responsible for Elena's death, for billions of deaths. She felt the weight of 30 years of pain and rage. "Now," she said, "now you face justice." 3 days. That was how long it took for humanity to secure every major world in the Valdran Empire. 3 days to accomplish what should have been impossible. 3 days that shocked the entire galaxy. The speed of the victory was not due to military might alone. It was due to knowledge. For 30 years, humans had been placed in every critical installation across the Empire. They knew where every weapons cache was hidden. They knew which systems controlled planetary defenses. They knew the access codes, the security protocols, and the backup systems. When the invasion began, humans were already inside every target. They didn't need to break in. They were already home. General Marcus Webb stood in what had been the Imperial Military Command Center, now converted to human control. Reports flowed in from across the former empire. Resistance was minimal. Most Valdran military units surrendered once they realized their own systems had been compromised. Some fought and died. Most simply gave up. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Valdran Empire had been a superpower for 10 millennia. They had seemed invincible. Now they had fallen to a species they had conquered and enslaved just 1 generation ago. Ambassador Lysara of the Thel Confederation sent a message that was broadcast across known space. The impossible has occurred. The Valdran Empire has fallen not to a greater military power, but to those they underestimated most. Every empire should take note. Every tyrant should be afraid. The age of easy conquest is over. On the imperial homeworld, now under human occupation, tribunals were established. Dr. Sarah Chen had argued for this. Not execution squads, not revenge killings, justice, real justice. The courthouse was built in what had been the Imperial Senate. Humans had constructed the building 20 years earlier as slave labor. Now they returned as judges. Emperor Daltheon was the first to face trial. He stood in the defendant's area, his scales dull, his posture defeated. Around him, the courtroom was filled with spectators, humans who had survived the camps, Valdrans who wanted to see their former leader face consequences, and representatives from other species across the galaxy who came to witness history. The charges were read aloud. Genocide, mass murder, enslavement, war crimes, crimes against sapient species. The list took 30 minutes to complete. Sarah Chen served as the primary prosecutor. She stood before the court and presented evidence that humans had gathered over 30 years. Records of the bombardment of Earth, lists of the 4 billion dead, documentation of the labor camps, video footage of executions, experiments, and abuse. The evidence was overwhelming. The crimes were undeniable. Daltheon's defense attorney, a Valdran lawyer named Cressix, tried to argue that the Emperor had been following established imperial law. That conquest was the Valdran way, that every empire in history had done similar things. Sarah responded calmly. Just because something has been done before does not make it right. Just because a law permits evil does not make it just. Your empire made slavery legal. That doesn't make it acceptable. It makes the law itself criminal. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witnesses testified. Survivors shared their stories. A human woman named Jennifer Wu described watching her parents killed in front of her when she was 12. A man named David Park told of spending 20 years in a mining camp, where workers died daily from exhaustion and abuse. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Grand Admiral Vexenil, the oldest member of the War Council, asked to speak. He was not on trial. He had cooperated with human forces and provided critical intelligence. But he wanted to testify. The old Valdran stood before the court and said, "I led the invasion of Earth 30 years ago. I gave the orders that killed billions. I told myself it was necessary. That conquest was our right. That might made right. I was wrong." He looked directly at the humans in the courtroom. "Your species taught me something I should have learned long ago. You were crushed, enslaved, broken, but you never stopped being people. You never stopped thinking, planning, and hoping. You endured suffering I cannot imagine, and you did it with purpose. You are stronger than we ever were because you built your victory on sacrifice, not cruelty." The courtroom was silent. Vexenil continued, "I want you to know something else. The Valdran Empire was not always as you saw it. 10,000 years ago, we were like you. We were conquered by another species, enslaved and forced to work for our masters. But when we finally freed ourselves, we became the very thing we had fought against. We became slavers, conquerors, the monsters who had once destroyed us." He looked at Emperor Daltheon. "We forgot what it meant to suffer. We forgot empathy. We forgot mercy, and now we pay the price. The testimony revealed something that shocked even the humans. The Valdran Empire had begun as victims. They had once been the slaves fighting for freedom, but instead of breaking the cycle of oppression, they had continued it. They had become the new tyrants. General Marcus Webb listened to this revelation with a heavy heart. After the testimony, he called a meeting of the human leadership. Sarah Chen, Admiral Kethver, and representatives from all the human forces gathered in a secure room. "We have a choice to make," Marcus said. "We've won. We have the power now. We can execute the Valdran leadership. We can enslave them the way they enslaved us. We can make them suffer for 30 years the way we suffered. Many of our people want exactly that." He paused, looking at each person in the room. "Or we can be better than they were. We can break the cycle instead of continuing it." The room erupted in argument. Some humans demanded blood for blood. Their families had died. Their lives had been stolen. Justice required punishment. Severe punishment. Others agreed with Marcus. Becoming like the Valdrans would dishonor the memory of everyone who had died. It would make Earth's suffering meaningless. Sarah Chen listened to both sides. She thought of Elena, her sweet daughter who would never grow up, never fall in love, never have children of her own. The rage she felt was immense. She wanted Daltheon to suffer. She wanted every Valdran who had participated in the conquest to feel the pain that humanity had felt. But she also thought of the technicians who had died activating the defense grid lockout, Maria Santos and her team. They had sacrificed themselves not for revenge but for freedom, for a future where no one would suffer as humans had suffered. "We hold trials," Sarah said finally. "We find every person guilty of crimes and we punish them according to law. But we don't become them. We don't enslave their species. We don't commit genocide. We prove that humanity is better than that." The vote was close, but humanity chose justice over vengeance. Emperor Daltheon and his war council were found guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment, not execution. They would spend the rest of their lives in cells, thinking about what they had done. The Valdran Empire was officially dissolved. Its territory was divided among the free systems that had been conquered. Species that had suffered under Valdran rule were given their independence. The massive military was dismantled. Weapons of mass destruction were destroyed, but the Valdran species itself was not punished. Civilians who had not participated in the conquest were allowed to live freely under human oversight. A generation that had nothing to do with Earth's destruction would not pay for the sins of their leaders. On the final day of the trial, Sarah Chen stood before the gathered representatives of the galaxy. The speech was broadcast to every civilized world. 30 years ago, the Valdran Empire came to Earth. They thought we were primitive and weak. They thought they could take what they wanted and face no consequences. They were wrong. She looked directly at the camera, knowing that beings across the galaxy were watching. We did not come for conquest. We came for justice. We did not come to build a new empire. We came to ensure this never happens again. Let every civilization that enslaves know this. Let every tyrant who oppresses understand this. Let every being who preys on the weak remember this. Her voice was quiet but carried the weight of 4 billion dead. Humanity remembers. We are patient. We are thorough. We will endure any hardship. We will wait as long as necessary. And we will never, ever stop coming for those who commit these crimes. We are not your conquerors. We are your conscience, and we are watching. The speech ended. The message was clear. The age of easy tyranny was over. 6 months had passed since the fall of the Valdran Empire. The galaxy was still adjusting to the new reality. An empire that had dominated for 10,000 years was gone, replaced by uncertainty. On the former Imperial homeworld, now called Unity Station, the transition was difficult. The Valdran people had known only empire. Their entire history was built on conquest and dominance. Now they were just another species trying to find their place in a galaxy that no longer feared them. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the streets of the capital city. The building still stood, but the atmosphere had changed. Valdran civilians went about their daily lives, but they moved differently now, less arrogant, more uncertain. They looked at humans with a mixture of fear, confusion, and sometimes shame. Sarah had accepted a position as the head of the transitional authority. Her job was to help former imperial worlds establish stable governments. It was exhausting work. Many species had been under Valdran rule for so long that they had forgotten how to govern themselves. She met with planetary representatives every day. The Kresh wanted to establish a democracy, but had no experience with voting. The Thalnir needed help rebuilding infrastructure that had been destroyed during their own conquest centuries ago. The Prel required mediators to resolve conflicts between different tribal groups that the Empire had forced together. Every problem required patience, negotiation, and careful planning. The work was endless. General Marcus Webb had taken on a different role. He commanded the peacekeeping fleet, human warships that patrolled former Imperial space to prevent chaos. Pirates emerged in systems where Imperial authority had vanished. Old rivalries between conquered species flared into violence. Some Valdran military officers tried to restart the Empire. Each threat had to be addressed carefully. Humanity had to be strong enough to maintain order, but not so dominant that they became the new tyrants. It was a difficult balance. Admiral Kethvar, the Valdran officer who had first detected the human fleet, worked alongside Marcus. His cooperation during the transition had earned him a place in the new order. He understood the Imperial military better than anyone, and helped identify which officers could be trusted and which needed to be watched. One day, Marcus and Kethvar stood together on the bridge of the human flagship Vindication, watching a patrol report come in. 3 Valdran destroyers tried to seize control of the pack system, the intelligence officer reported. They're claiming they're restoring the Empire, Marcus sighed. How many ships do we need to send? Already handled, sir. The Prel Defense Force intercepted them. The Valdran officers surrendered without a fight when they realized they were outnumbered. Kithvar made a sound of approval. The Prel were slaves a year ago. Now they defend their own space. Your plan is working, General. It's not my plan, Marcus said. It's just basic decency. Help people stand on their own instead of standing on top of them. As the months passed, humanity made a discovery that changed everything. In the Imperial archives, deep in classified databases that only the highest officials could access, human technicians found something horrifying. Sarah was called to review the data. What she saw made her stomach turn. The files contained records of the Valdran Empire's conquests spanning 10,000 years. World after world, species after species. But what made Sarah's blood run cold was a specific category of files marked complete pacification. Complete pacification meant total genocide. Species that were completely exterminated. There were hundreds of entries. The Krell, a species of aquatic beings, exterminated 5,000 years ago. Their crime was refusing to surrender their ocean worlds for mining. The Voss, a species of flying creatures, exterminated 3,000 years ago. They were declared too difficult to enslave and eliminated. The list went on and on. Hundreds of civilizations that once existed in the galaxy, all destroyed by the Valdran Empire, all erased from history. Sarah found the entry for Earth. The file was marked, Scheduled Complete Pacification, Postponed. Earth was supposed to be destroyed. The Valdrans had planned to extract all useful resources, work the humans to death, and then eliminate any survivors. The only reason humanity still existed was that humans had proven too useful as scientists and engineers. The Empire had postponed the genocide indefinitely. If humans had been less intelligent, they would have been exterminated like the others. Sarah called an emergency meeting of the human leadership. The information was shared with representatives from across the galaxy. The reaction was shock and horror. The Valdran Empire was even worse than anyone had realized. 417 species, Marcus said, reading from the report. 417 civilizations completely destroyed. Gone forever. We're fighting for people who will never exist again. The revelation changed the conversation about what to do with the Valdrans. Some argued that a species capable of such atrocities should be punished more severely. Others pointed out that the current generation of Valdrans had not committed those crimes. The cycle had to end somewhere. Humanity chose to maintain their original position. The guilty would be punished. The innocent would be free. But the information would be made public. Every Valdran would know the true history of their empire. They would carry the shame of what their ancestors had done. A massive memorial was constructed on Unity Station. It listed all 417 exterminated species, the names of their homeworlds, the dates of their destruction. A reminder of the cost of tyranny. On Earth, a different memorial was being built. The planet was slowly being restored. The atmosphere was clearing. The radiation was fading. Forests were beginning to grow in the crater zones. It would take decades, maybe centuries, but Earth would live again. The memorial on Earth was for the 4 billion humans who died in the conquest. Every name was recorded. Every life remembered. The monument stretched for miles, covered in names carved in stone. Sarah Chen visited the memorial on the anniversary of the conquest. She walked the long paths between the walls of names, searching. Finally, she found it. Elena Chen, age 8, died defending her homeworld. Sarah placed her hand on her daughter's name. She was 71 years old now. Her hair was white. Her body was tired, but she had lived to see justice. She had lived to see Earth beginning to heal. We won. She whispered to her daughter's memory. You can rest now. But even as Earth healed and the former empire stabilized, new threats emerged. Human deep space probes detected signals from beyond the known galaxy, powerful transmissions from civilizations that were not part of the familiar galactic community. The intelligence was brought to General Marcus Webb. He studied the data with growing concern. The signals showed the presence of multiple advanced civilizations. Some were larger than the Valdran Empire had been. Some showed signs of military activity. A meeting was called. Representatives from across human leadership gathered to discuss what the signals meant. Are they hostile? Someone asked. Unknown, the intelligence officer replied. Some of the signals appear to be military frequencies. Others are civilian, but the presence of so much activity suggests major powers exist beyond our current borders. Marcus looked at Sarah. What do you think? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think we need to make a choice. We can retreat to Earth, rebuild in isolation, and hope these new powers ignore us. Or we can take a place in the larger galactic community and face whatever comes. We've just finished one war, another officer said. Our people are tired. Many want to go home to Earth and never fight again. I understand that, Sarah replied. I want that too. But retreating won't keep us safe. The Valdrans found us once. Others will find us again. The question is whether we face the future as victims or as equals. A vote was called. It was close. Many humans wanted nothing more than to go home and rebuild. The war had taken everything from them. They had earned peace. But in the end, humanity voted to engage with the galaxy, not as conquerors but as protectors. They would defend the weak. They would oppose tyranny. They would ensure that no species suffered as humanity had suffered. 1 year after the fall of the Empire, the first human diplomatic mission departed for the distant civilizations. The mission was led by Ambassador Jennifer Wu, the woman who had testified at Daltheon's trial. She carried a message of peace and a warning of strength. Humanity was no longer hiding, no longer weak, no longer afraid. Dr. Sarah Chen was offered a position on the diplomatic mission, but she declined. She was too old, too tired. She had fought her war. Let the next generation build the peace. Instead, she accepted command of Earth's first true flagship. The ship was named in honor of her daughter. The Elena's Revenge was the most advanced vessel in the human fleet, incorporating everything humanity had learned from 3 decades of studying Valdran technology and improving it. The ship's crew was young. Many of them were children who had been born in the labor camps. They had grown up slaves and become warriors. Now they would be explorers and guardians. On the day the Elena's Revenge launched, Sarah stood on the bridge and looked at her crew. They were ready. Humanity was ready. A distress signal arrived from a system at the edge of known space. The transmission was garbled, but the message was clear. A primitive civilization was under attack. An unknown aggressor was bombarding their world.